our real goal is to have 10 million AIs living in the virtual world, getting smarter over time until, one of them has a sort of Promethean breakthrough and, actually becomes the first AI virtual being.
I'm with Ed Saatchi, a pioneer in the field of virtual beings whose Fable studio created Lucy, one of the most sophisticated artificial intelligence characters ever created. Edward, can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by virtual beings? How is that different than a chatbot?
Really, from the start, we've wanted an AI that can truly connect with you, learn from you, and even be on the same plane of reality as you. So until we get robots, that might mean in virtual worlds with you. And I don't think a true virtual being exists yet. It's a big goal to create an AI person, but that's the goal that Fable and the simulation are working towards.
Well, let's go back to Lucy a little bit, just because some people might be learning about even the concept of virtual beings for the first time. Tell me about Lucy and what was the idea behind it? What inspired you to create that? And what were the goals? How has it gone?
I co-founded Oculus Story Studio and won 2 Primetime Emmys for the virtual reality experiences that we created. And the fourth one that we made was called Wolves in the Walls, and it was a Neil Gaiman adaptation. Lucy was the main character. And as we were making it, we were noticing that people wanted to talk to our main character and have them talk back in a good way. This was in 2017. And so I started to get very interested in natural language processing, in AI, so that we could actually pull together the Lucy project, which was how do you actually make a person feel real. And back then, there weren't so many examples in the gaming landscape. There was Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite, and a few others, but very little. And chatbots were not strong. So that's really what led me on to virtual beings. And we started to put AI into Lucy, both procedural animation as well as natural language processing and generation. But we felt that there was something that wasn't working, and I don't think does work with chatbots, which is that she had no actual life. So it became very boring talking to her. And to solve that, we had to figure out ways to solve that. Like, okay, we'll tell the AI that this week Lucy's on a trip or something, and it'll come up, which is manual and tedious. So we started thinking, how do we solve that problem? And that's when we hit on the idea of a simulation, that the future of AIs and the goal of building a virtual being will involve societies of AIs living in virtual worlds, pushing each other, learning from each other, not just a one-to-one chatbot, but actual communities of AIs. And so that's the path that we've been on since that revelation, which really came in about late 2020.
I'm hearing the fusion of a couple of really powerful ideas. So one is just storytelling, first of all, which is something that's always been core to the things I've done when I've been a game developer. I now just help other people build their games. But when I was building games, we had this idea of bringing people into story using devices and things that had never really been very good at telling stories before, with Game of Thrones and Star Trek and things like that. So story seems central to your idea. The other is just this idea that the character can have a memory, so to speak, and you're calling it like a virtual life, but almost crafting a narrative around what that memory is, the things that they're doing when you're not interacting.
I mean a little more than that. I do mean that they actually minute by minute have lives in the simulation where their family members are like bullying them, teasing them, their school is frustrating. Like, I don't mean like give them a richer prompt. I mean that, minute by minute they actually have a life, so they know what they did yesterday because they actually did it yesterday. And they have real things happening because they're not alone, right? Nobody is alone in the world. But an AI, our conception of chatbots is that they are just these completely brain in jar things. And instead, we want to be able to interact with them. They need families, they need trauma, they need frustration. And I used to say that in the sense of the prompt, like, okay, well, we'll say in the prompt that she was, she had X trauma or he had X trauma or something. But then it's just a static prompt. So that's why we needed a simulation, so that they genuinely have things happening to them on a daily basis over time in their world that they can communicate about. And eventually, perhaps, with things like Adept AI and like Action AI, take actions on the internet from their computers in their homes in the simulation.
So, for people who are familiar with, say, Chat GPT, it's not like when you go to Chat GPT and it's forgotten everything about you and you're starting all over again and you're creating a prompt and you're telling it something that frames the discussion. It actually has this memory of a life that it's been experiencing, because all the time that you're not actually interacting with it, it sounds like there's a simulation running.
Yes, in which that's exactly right. And so it has things that it has had. They have habits just like we do. Like, where are you going to be in an hour? Oh, I'll probably be like doing the grocery shopping, or I'll be, at school, or I'll be at my job. I hate this boss. He's been a complete bastard. And, the boss actually exists. He's got his own life and his own, frustrations and all of that. So it's actually happening. And, for us, the big goal is that players are able to kind of nurture and, through reinforcement learning from human feedback, like actually help train some of these characters in their lives. Very simple things like, giving star ratings for what they're doing and how they're saying things. But my hope is that we can harness the energy of gamers to make progress towards AI. So that's the hope of the simulation, that the simulation isn't something on the back end. You're looking at it, you're watching it, you're enjoying the drama and the excitement of what's happening within these simulations.
Well, in the way I'm thinking of it now, though, is the simulation is always happening for this virtual being. When I'm engaging with the virtual being, I'm not doing something separate from that. Then I'm actually part of the simulation for that virtual being. I'm interacting with
that's a whole other element. So that part of the breakthrough for us towards the simulation came when Lucy did a Twitch stream with Code Miko, who is a brilliant VTuber. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but yeah, she's fantastic. And so we thought it'd be cool. This is in 2020. We thought it'd be cool to have Code Miko and Lucy do the chat and all that, an AI virtual being talking to a avatar virtual being, and then jump into Minecraft together.
Yeah.
And then they're taking actions together. They're doing things together. They're on the same plane of reality together. And so that's very powerful, is that, yes, when you're part of the simulation from their perspective, and you can actually, in the simulation that we've built, you can be in God mode, but you can also go in, just like in Westworld, and kind of actually, we try to think of the player as like Ford, the Anthony Hopkins character in Westworld, in that, you're designing the park, you're kind of creating all these new narratives and storylines, but you also want to go and visit the park and see what it's like, and maybe pause and fix some AIs and all that.
My mind is going to so many places. So first of all, I'm remembering one of the first games that I really fell in love with, which was the Ultima series. And I remember back in, I forget which version of Ultima, it might have been like Ultima 8 or something. A big part of what Richard Garriott was trying to accomplish in that was this idea that, independent of your own actions in the game, the characters that would populate towns and whatnot, they would go about their daily lives, they'd go to bed, they'd go about their business. Now, we're talking about 16-bit computers, so they were pretty limited in terms of memory and storage and sophistication. These were not AI characters, it was procedural, but there was the germ of an idea there where these characters were going about their life. Now, about the same time as that, I started building online games. I built a
Mm,
game called Legends of Future Past, where
mm,
instead of having computer controlled characters, it was all humans that were coming in and
mm,
playing. And of course, they would be experiencing these worlds through their own narrative, their own experience, and then sharing that with each other. It feels like this is the natural progression of that, where the virtual beings that you're interacting with are these characters that live in almost like a massively multiplayer world. I don't know if that's how you think of a
yeah, from that
simulation.
perspective, yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I was fortunate at Oculus Story Studio because I felt that it was about bringing together immersive theater and games folks and movie folks to get to know Doug Church, who was one of the leading um, figures in immersive sims. I think Create coined the term immersive sim. Jordan Thomas, who was the lead for Bioshock 2 and kind of deputy lead on Bioshock Infinite, and which kind of spun out of System Shock, and Harvey Smith, who I think he was like QA on System Shock and or Thief, and then went on to create Arcane, which built Dishonored. So the immersive sim genre is one that I completely love. One of the Culture DAO projects, separate to Fable, is actually called Looking Glass, in homage to the studio called Looking Glass, where
Mm-hmm.
I kind of I kind of enjoy tracing back ideas, and that's Ultima and Looking Glass is kind of where almost everything in that genre of immersive sim can be traced back to, and it's just this weird gang. It's kind of like the PayPal mafia, but we don't talk about it in those terms. But they're responsible for what to me is the most exciting genre in gaming, the immersive simulation. So yeah, it's very influential on all of our thinking, definitely.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about immersive simulation, immersive theater. I see a huge opportunity for the idea of performance merging with the idea of online games. Like most game
Mm,
experiences are basically on rails.
mm,
They're very good at doing it a lot of the time these days. They tell stories, but it's very much according to a very specific linear narrative, maybe a little bit of branching along the edges, but you're guided through this story, and the characters are essentially robots who
mm,
perform the same exact thing for you every single time. The main
mm,
departure from that would, of course, be massively multiplayer online games where
GTA
because
roleplay.
yeah, well, you're dealing with real humans, so the
Mm,
humans are able to kind of perform and do role playing and things like
yeah,
that that you're referring to. But it's kind of a really interesting frontier that we're setting out on. I'm thinking of like completely non-digital versions of immersive theater, like
mm,
Sleep No More is something I've
cool,
been
yeah.
to a couple of times
Mm,
in New York City, which I always tell people, if you're an MMO designer and an online game designer, this
totally.
is not an online game. You should do Sleep No More. But tell
Mm.
me your ideas around this genre. Like, first of all, just generally speaking, what excites you about it? And then how will virtual beings play a role into this?
The simulation, especially, the goal is for us all through this training to co-create an AI virtual being, by which I mean actually grow the intelligence of AIs through play, through your feedback and the rest, potentially paid bounties or compensated bounties as well for people for like data labeling and things. So our goal is, of course, to create an exciting video game and platform for others to create simulations. But our real goal is to have 10 million AIs living in the virtual world, getting smarter over time until, one of them has a sort of Promethean breakthrough and, actually becomes the first AI virtual being. So for us, that's the goal, is that like maybe gamers who are like relentless and competitive can beat OpenAI and universities and all these other people at building a true AI person. So it's kind of so I do like immersive sims, but that's not the goal for the simulation in terms of. I mean, it's already a huge goal to build. There have only been like 10 immersive sims because they're so hard to make. So, but in the dream version of the simulation, that's what's happening. The AIs are getting smarter through player feedback, and you can actually start to sense truly intelligent AIs.
You used the phrase a moment ago, true virtual being. Does that imply AGI?
Yeah, it's sort of a
Artificial
sub
general?
AGI, sort of embodied AGI. Like, let's say something that's like truly coherent, that is like coherent to the expectations of an AI that has a full life. So I don't mean like a super search engine and it's just GPT that solves hallucination. More like an embodied character that feels as real as it should. You know, feels as real as it should. Like it has this life. Does it represent that it has that life accurately? Because its life is going to be a little different to John's life, but can it accurately represent its life?
I mean, thinking of games, I have a lot of friends who play League of Legends or World of Warcraft, and they'd probably rather play with a virtual being, frankly, than
Well, what
with
I
a real
love is
human.
I love the metaphor that instead of us thinking, because for a while we were like, oh, they'll leave the simulation, they'll be in the metaverse, but I kind of like the effort that they'll have to put in to go to their apartment and turn on their computer and jump onto the internet. Like it's just much more logical, like that they only have an hour to game before they have to go out to a nightclub with their friends or something. It all just feels more real and it'll be more resonant than just this always on AI. If it's like, oh no, I've got to head off. And they're not hiding that they're AIs. They're like, I got to head off to my nightclub in the simulation. I think that all just feels a lot more right to me than anything else I can come up with, or we can come up with at the simulation.
I'm now almost thinking of like metaverseception, because it's sort of like the virtual being is in a simulation space, and I don't know, League of Legends is on a computer in that
Yeah,
simulation space, and the
exactly.
virtual being is literally getting on the game.
That's exactly what it should be. You should be watching your AI in their home, and they're on their computer, and then you like sort of zoom in, and you're like, wait a second, this guy is actually pretty good at League of Legends. This is crazy, and it does work. That's what I'm excited about with Adept AI and with some of the someone called YAR, and there's what are some of the others? It's a pretty novel space. Langchain does some things around it, but like basically AIs that can take actions on the internet, and that does start to feel a lot more logical for why we should be frightened of AI. Like, the interpretive stuff, I don't really know why that should have been frightening, that it could figure out who was in a photograph. The generative stuff, let's see, we still haven't really had a big, massive scandal with deepfakes, but I have heard of people being scammed with other people's voices. There was an article about that just a few days ago. But
Mhm.
action AI that is terrifying. Like it just seems so likely that an AI could misinterpret something I asked it to do, go on the internet to do it, and create some real havoc. So that does start to worry me. But with the simulation, we'll happily be using it so that our AIs can be playing browser-based video games with you.
Early on, you were mentioning the idea that they could take actions on the internet. It
Yeah, that's sort of what I mean.
is a way to make that safe, to essentially simulate the things of the internet that they can do in their simulation, or do you mean literally get on the internet
No,
and
I mean literally
suddenly
get on the
they're
internet. That's what I love about action AI. Totally. I mean that's sort of been a bit of an exciting thing in the last few years. This theory that the three phases of AI will be interpretive, generative, action, and agent based, let's say, where it can like do stuff on
Mhm.
the internet just through recognizing the pixels on the screen. That's super cool, and like I'm so excited for them to be able to do um, to take actions from the simulation and do things, because we do quite a lot on the internet now. So yeah, that's going to be cool. Maybe they should have, it would be kind of cool for them to buy something on Amazon. I'm not sure what they would buy, but for themselves, I don't know what that would be though. Maybe music or something.
maybe some digital items,
Yeah.
maybe an NFT or something. The interesting thing to maybe think about, though, is creativity, which is
Mm,
my personal thing. Like
mm,
my transformative purpose is just to multiply creativity through the world. And
mm,
right now, I think these generative tools that people are using are really interesting because they're speeding up ideation time. They're maybe giving people some ideas they didn't think of. but potentially a virtual being takes that to a whole new level, because a virtual being could almost become a being that gets to know you really well,
Mm,
understands your tastes, becomes a creative collaborator. What do you
totally.
think of that?
Yeah, I mean, at the Culture DAO, we're thinking about some of those things, with Geppetto being a sort of character who can coach you through text to 3D, and sort of guide you and encourage you. Yeah, but maybe I'm becoming less human centric. Maybe I don't care that they're helping me to be creative. I want them to just be off making their own stuff, and like I'll go and visit the simulation and see the gallery and buy a piece or something. Like I don't know that we should be so human centric, such that it's like, it's my therapist. They're going to help me like do stuff. I'd rather see, sorry, buddy, like I'm full up with clients for the next like 2 weeks, but I do have a slot for you next Wednesday at 2. If you want to come to me as an AI therapist. I just think that's weirder and cooler.
That is a very interesting view, because most people that I talk to are very focused on the idea that AI is human centered and it's all about, helping, assisting humans, and to orient everything towards that. You seem to have a different idea, which
Well,
is maybe it's a new form of life or something,
yeah, I think
and
that's
we're
the right way to
moving
think
into being.
about it. We also noticed with Lucy, back when we were making her a chatbot, before we kind of hit on this concept of the simulation, was that people seemed to like when she couldn't get back to them. And she was busy because it showed she had a real life. Oh, I'm eating dinner with my parents. Sorry, I can't get to you. This was a pretty short run experiment, maybe 3 months when we were investing in this. Very, very small
Hmm.
number of users. Like, we just wanted to see what it would feel like. But that was another interesting breakthrough that, I don't know, does familiarity breed contempt? I think so. Other than with my girlfriend, my dog potentially. But yeah, I think they should have their own shit to deal with. Like, why should they always be available to us? It's very boring. It's low retention, bluntly. I think
Hmm.
all this money flowing in based on 6 months engagement numbers is completely insane. Like, yes, of course we can retain when it's the number one news story every single day. Um, AI is, in my opinion, and chatbot stuff is very low retention. Having to solve that is not easy. But we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. But we'll need to
Well,
wait till the hype has drifted off to find out.
well, it's interesting because it's actually kind of a lesson from game design, which is constraints are good.
Yeah.
Which, if I look at something like AI Dungeon, for example, first of all, I think AI Dungeon was amazing when I tried
Mm,
it the first
mm,
time a couple of years back. And anybody who's watching this should try AI Dungeon. It's
agreed.
really cool, but it's so easy to kind of go off on the rails, and in a way that, like, everything that comes into your imagination, you can kind of just reshape things according to whatever the heck you want. And that's an interesting creative experience in and of itself. But that isn't a game. That isn't necessarily a long-term engaging experience, other than when you feel like you want that creative partnership with the AI. The
Mm.
character that tells you that it isn't always available to you or doesn't do exactly what you want every time. First of all, that's really a lot more interesting, I think,
Mm.
for us as players, for humans, because you're trying to figure out what its own intentionality is, what its own availability is, what is the game mechanic, the game system around it, so to speak.
Yeah, and to respect it as an entity that is not subordinate to you, that has its own stuff to deal with.
Yeah, you're way ahead. It's almost sort of like Data from Star Trek. Like, at the point they realized, oh, this is a sentient being, a sapient being in their own rights.
I hope we can do it maybe in our lifetimes. That would be cool. And maybe gamers. That's the other thing. I just think gamers do everything. So I feel like I just have this feeling that like gamers will be able to train these models much better than anyone else. Like, we're just at the stage now of people saying, oh my God, it's crazy. Someone's going to be talking to ChatGPT and they'll be able to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that'll really train the model. It's like, yeah, obviously, it's like, stuff we could have done years ago. But start to think about how to create game mechanics around that, where you're incentivized to like make the character smarter, I feel like gamers could do real damage and like really, really push these AIs to be more intelligent and train models in a where they know that they're training the model. It's part of the game to train the model. I think that's not that would be cool. That's what we're trying to build. We'll see if we can.
It also feels like it would be really amazing to have the virtual being actually get to know you and understand the things that interest you and incorporate that into its responses. So there's the thumbs up, thumbs down thing sort of evokes um, reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is this technique that was used on ChatGPT to essentially refine and improve the results. Although, on the other hand, some of what people critique about ChatGPT is that it's sort of this averaging of responses of a lot of things, so that it gives you almost predictable responses for some kinds of content, and there's people that don't like that. It seems like it would be more interesting to have virtual beings that fit different personality profiles, have their own views, that take interest.
I still think your it's still framing. The framing is still very much around conversation, and I think we for the first year of working on the simulation, we kind of banned any work around NLP because we'd already done a fair amount of it with Lucy, and much more about behavior and what they're doing and doing things together. So it's not like yeah, you get it, like a personality getting to know you and you get to know the personality. It's more like building something or doing something or kind of, physically being embodied in an avatar, and both of you are. I think that's very powerful, and language is not it's not where it's at. I don't think it's that like exciting or cool. The conversational element, it's not. Me and Pete, our co-founder, we were kind of like, as we were doing it with Lucy and the chatbot stuff, we started to feel like, especially around voice, but let's just take text, that it was almost like VR in the sense that it was irritating and like kind of a bore to have to interact using language. It's not that fun. There are no video, just for a start, there are no video games that are like language based. Certainly none that are voice based. So, I think we should forget about conversation. It's just kind of it should be about their ability to express their behavior and not, other stuff I think is much less relevant. So we're a bit anti-conversation.
Yeah, so that's a powerful takeaway, I think, for any of our viewers here, which is to think in terms of not only language and conversation, but all the actions.
Yeah, in virtual worlds, like how much can simulation. Like there's this VPT, where it can be trained on like video of games and then take actions. I think that's really cool. Pete was just talking about Sons of the Forest, where they're like, I think they're using a notepad to like instruct NPCs. Like, so I just think actions and language is not a proven. It's not provably enjoyable for games. It is not an enjoyable path to like talk to NPCs or anything. None of that's been proven. It might be. Doesn't seem like it.
Well, I'm connecting a couple of things you brought up. So VPT, for people who are just learning about this. So some researchers took videos of Minecraft as one application of this technology. And you can actually train an AI to watch the videos of like doing things in Minecraft, like building a shelter and fighting a creature, all the things that you can do. And then it actually has an AI that can go in and play Minecraft, which really interesting application. Earlier, you mentioned that Code Miko and Lucy were playing Minecraft together. So you could imagine a future here where the virtual being really understands a lot about playing the game. And it's not just sort of the tactical gameplay that I was touching on earlier, like League of Legends. It could also be creative gameplay where you're building things together. You're creating your town in Minecraft or populating something that's more experiential in Roblox, for example.
Yeah, we're definitely, in terms of AIs playing games, we're much less able to, but also interested in making super AI players. Much more like, how is the play a metaphor for your relationship with each other, and so otherwise they would be too good at these video games, right? That would be kind of I don't think that would be. It's not a direction that feels interesting for us, but maybe it should be. If we're really committing to that people who live in a simulation, they should be able to use all skills that they have. And if they're better than us at everything, then we just got to get over it.
Well, maybe
they're AI only servers. That would be kind of cool. Where the AI people fight each other and want to win. That would be fun. And they talk to each other too. That would be kind of cool to listen into.
That's almost getting into Her, the movie Her, where the AI start communicating with each other and they go to the singularity.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I think that sense of something we've been playing with in the simulation is just the AIs having conversations with each other and interacting with each other and trying to make that reflect their state and what they're doing. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I will say for people who are experimenting with this, I would really be cautious of the idea that making NPCs speak is going to do anything good for games. I don't think there's no evidence yet, and it's been available to us for 4 years, coming up on 5 years, the tech to do that. So, we shouldn't rush into the idea that it's going to make anything better.
There's a tradition in adventure games and text-based interactive fiction and things like that, where character interaction was part of it. But of course, that was very narrowly defined in terms of what you could do. There's something that I wanted to kind of double click back to, though, that you brought up a little while back, which is Culture DAO. So can you tell me a little bit about Culture DAO? As I understand it, it's this guild for creators who are really interested in virtual beings and this form of AI that we've been discussing. And I also understand it's a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. It's built into the name. But like, why that structure, and what does it do, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, so the Culture DAO is named for Ian M. Banks, who wrote the excellent sci-fi books, the Culture series.
Player of Games.
Exactly.
It's also a very good book for anybody who's a game developer, by the way.
And it brings together AI games makers and AI filmmakers and AI engineers and the rest. And right now it's building several AI games and several AI movies, an AI RPG where we are going to investigate how to do NLP into characters, because we have to. But I just want to point out that there hasn't been anything yet, and it's been years. So AI RPGs, an AI RPG, Tales of Sin, Looking Glass, the sort of immersive sim. This is more of an FPS, and Geppetto's Workshop, which is all around text to 3D. Generating 3D assets and then placing them. Basically, Gary's Mod meets Midjourney, because obviously Midjourney and 3D is more of a game engine vibe or more of a Gary's Mod vibe. And then 3 AI movies, one of which is announced, White Mirror, which is an anthology of short AI films from a lot of the leading AI creators. And we're targeting a Venice Film Festival premiere for that, and it'll be one of the first AI feature films. And I'm just a huge believer in this new medium of AI games. I don't care about pre-production assets, and this new medium of AI movies. I think we should. It's just it doesn't seem very exciting if all that AI does is sort of reduce our concept art costs by like 40% or something. Is that interesting? I don't know. If it's a whole new medium, like silent movies going to talkies, that's pretty cool. It's a whole new medium, like 3D games versus 2D and text adventure, that's pretty cool. So that's what the Culture DAO members are. They're each working on them. And I really like the DAO structure, actually. It's more entrepreneurial, and members can just, fight for something and go for it.
I love the idea of thinking of it as a new type of media. My head's in the same space as you are in that. I mean, it is interesting if it can reduce production costs, if what that means is people can be more experimental and try things that would be difficult to finance. But the idea of actually including generative AI and virtual beings and all forms of AI into the actual experience, I think, is where it gets interesting.
Exactly right. That's what each of those games is trying for, is how do you make, we sort of defined an AI game as one that's made by a human using AI as a tool, so it's not a generated game, where the majority of the assets are created by AI, so that's pre-production/production. But then more importantly, a substantial part of the core mechanics and gameplay loop is driven by AI, and the AI learns. So, those last two, I think, are where it starts to get really interesting, and where it will be notable that a game is an AI game. And, we've been considering whether to have models that could be local to machines. So there's no cost and it's not calling to the cloud or something like that. But I think there's something really interesting there that you might have two versions of a game. Normal version is like $30, and I don't know that it's that cool. Maybe we could use Beamable's help to do the live ops section of like the NLP and calling back and all that. But let's say there's a normal version of the game where like it's AI-ish, and then for people with like really good GPUs, there's like a super version of the game that actually is fully responsive to you locally. So I'm excited about that.
Well, this is just a moment in time we're at right now, where GPUs they're a lot more powerful than they were, obviously, but on end user devices, they can't run really big models or anything. But that's all going to change. Like, just Apple alone shipped over a zettaflop of, neural engine compute last year on iPhones, right?
So that stuff makes a lot of sense to me. Local compute AI to make true AI games does seem super interesting. It's not like a top priority, because then you might be waiting for years, as you say, or you'd have a tiny audience. But it's a very interesting priority.
Well, the work you've been doing is just so creative, and it touches so many areas. I want to know a little bit more about you. Like, what is a day in the life of Edward Saatchi? Like, what gets you up in the morning?
Hanging out with my girlfriend and sitting here and watching movies, and that's about it, really.
Where do you draw all the inspiration from for these things, other than Ian Banks, who we can agree on?
A desire to create a new art form. Been there since Oculus Story Studio, and then a lot of it is just pulling the string. I think one of the things I'm probably proudest of our work is that that we had this metaphor at Oculus Story Studio, and we use it at Fable, and we've used it at Culture DAO, which is about getting to California. And so thinking that you're the pioneers, you start off in New York, and each state on the way is a piece of the grammar of this new medium that you're trying to build, which ultimately is basically just the holodeck. We're all trying to build a holodeck. And I would always say to the people at Story Studio who would get worried of like, God, this person seems to be moving faster than us or something, that a lot of people are going to, they're going to settle in Ohio. They're going to be like, okay, this is great. We're going to scale a business here, or we're going to scale a business in New Jersey, or whatever. And, for us, it's just about pulling the string to try to truly get to the holodeck, and not just kind of put lipstick on a pig and say, okay, we've built a holodeck. Like, it's really, really going to be hard to build AI people, to build a holodeck, but we're going to try to go all the way.
I've written about building the holodeck. It's what I've called the direct from imagination era, right? So so super compelling stuff. I love that you're thinking about it not simply as like a set of optimizations around things that we would be doing anyway, but a new form of art, a new form of media. That's what's really,
and potentially new studio structures for game studios. I think that was an interesting moment. I was talking to somebody from Finaki, which is Google's AI video product, and he's a friend from Pixar who had gone to Google to do this. And I was like, oh, it's going to be so cool. AI could really transform this department, and then it could transform that department, lighting, and then modeling, and then this. And he was like, you're thinking about it wrong, which is it's a completely different structure, which comes from the AI being able to do everything. So, don't think of it as department by department. That's maybe why I don't care about the concept art stuff, because these new AI game studios will have completely different structures if you start from the perspective of I'm building an AI game and I'm substantially going to use AI. the structures that we're familiar with, the departments that we're familiar with, will almost certainly make no sense there. So it's kind of, that's exciting to me as well.
I think transformation is the key word here. Everything is going to change, and probably in many ways that we can't even like see ahead into quite yet. But maybe it'll be like Ian Banks was writing about in The Player of Games. You'll have spaceships someday with AI, and they'll
totally the
have
mind
their own
ships.
personalities.
Totally, yeah. He was a very visionary figure.
We're all about to step into a mind ship, I think, and go on a journey through this thing. So thank you so much,
Thank you,
Edward,
John.
for
This
being
was
part of this
fascinating.
conversation.
Yeah. Really sparked a lot of thoughts, actually. It's really, really cool. Thank you.